Are Florida State fans ready for the big game against the Georgia Bulldogs? Well, today you get to talk about all your opportunities to discuss the players playing for the Noles and all the players that aren't.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into another episode of Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, and today I'm going to give fans an opportunity to discuss what they're concerned about, what they're happy about with this upcoming game, the Orange Bowl against the Georgia Bulldogs. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So let's just get kind of the baseline of this out of it. Been doing some research and looking at the different players that have opted in, opted out, back in, transfer portal, NFL draft. It is very confusing. If nothing else, I know that's what I took away from it. I'm hoping to provide a little bit of clarity, and from the fans, please comment in the chats. I'll get to that here in just a second. I'm curious what everybody thinks, because this is, if you take nothing else away from this entire episode, note this. This is the new norm in college football. This is not a news flash. It is a one-time thing. This is going to be the way it is moving forward year after year. Now, the total number will change, but Florida State, Georgia, they're programs that have a lot of pride. They've got a lot of NFL history, national championships, etc., and they still have players moving around before a big bowl. That puts things in perspective. So I want to give my own thoughts, and then I'm going to open it up. Anybody who wants to, I'm going to start reading from the chat here in a few minutes, but these are my thoughts about it in general. I'll get into a few players in particular, and I have a series of 4 questions that I want to ask as well. Again, please answer and comment as you see fit in the chat. I'm more than happy to take any of your comments. So, number one, to me, this is an extension of the 23 season into 24. It's an extra spring practice with all the practice sessions. I believe it's 12 for the bowl games, but don't quote me on that. The point is still the same. I talked about in the podcast that I had yesterday on the DBs. Check that out. It's about 10 minutes just on the young DBs on the depth chart. Guys like Jamie Howard, Kai Bates, etc., coming in to push those younger players. Conrad Hussey, got Jones, all these young guys, Kirkland, etc. They're going to be really good moving forward. These kinds of players together, though, especially Hussey and those guys that actually practice, are going to be playing. Like, I've still got it sitting here. Hussey played 168 snaps this year at DB as a true freshman. That's going to help him. He's going to be going against Georgia's Georgia's receivers today. They have players. When they play, I don't think there's going to be any doubt that he's going to get beat some. But this is also how you get better. So that's my first takeaway. It's an opportunity. I want to look at it from a positive perspective. All these different players like NFL draft, etc. I don't know the exact number, but like the Tallahassee Democrats said, there's like 20 some players for Florida State that have either been in the portal, that have transferred, etc. And, NFL, all that combined. Farmer was in the portal. Now he's not. All those things combined equal this. It's turmoil. But again, it is the new norm. And if you don't like it, that's okay. But you're not going to be able to change it. I don't really like it either. I'm a traditionalist. I like to watch a kid come in as a freshman or as a junior college player and develop over time. There's just not as much of that. With that stated, before I go into the questions in the chat, one last thing. This is very important. Florida State is a 19.5-point underdog. I just checked it a few minutes ago as of Thursday morning. That's what the odds were on like FanDuel and some other apps. They're all around 19. Let's just say 19 points. That's humongous. I don't even think Brock Bowers is playing. That's the expectation. That's what Kirby Smart has basically said. Brock's still a little banged up, and Brock's as good a tight end as you're going to see in college football, and they're still favored by that many. Florida State, you would think some of the players, definitely the coaches and everybody on the staff in any way, shape, or form, it's going to be a little pride. Don't you think? 19.5? I was like, holy smokes, that is just enormous. I would be personally, as a player, really ticked off about that. I'm not saying Georgia shouldn't win. They probably should. They have more players that are playing in the game than Florida State. That's not really something you can look at any other way. It's just math. They do. 19.5-point spread, though? I don't know. That's a little concerning to me. And that's something that I think that the Florida State players are probably a little bit, it's a little bit difficult to understand. I don't know how they come up with some of these. And I know that guys in Vegas and everywhere else, they got their own reasons. But good Lord, that's a lot. Angelo Smith, hey, man, what's going on? Happy holidays to you again, my friend. Good to see you. I know that this is a very weird and unusual time for college football because of all the goofiness that goes along with any form of the opt-outs and everything. But once again, thank you very much. Happy holidays to you and your family. But I am kind of curious I'm curious any Georgia fans come in here. There might be a few. There's usually fans from different groups. Mike, what's up, man? Hey, how you doing? Mike, if you're not a positive guy, don't hang around Mike Merrick. He's the most positive guy that comes in here, man. Terrence Owens, what's up? How you doing? Here are the questions real quick. I might as well just throw out a few of these just for fun. The first one, and this is just a personal thing. I took it from a fan perspective. Any fan that watches this game, somebody's a diehard for the Dogs or the Noles, going to have questions, things they look for. But even people just casually watching, I think they'd be curious about this. What's the expectation for Florida State's passing game without really good players that have decided for the NFL, without your number one running back, who's a pretty good pass protector, and you're down to your third string quarterback? I mean, that is a weird dynamic. Still an experienced offensive line. I think Mo's playing, if I remember right, up front. That's the first thing I'd look at. Do you have your center? Line calls are very important in this game. Georgia's obviously got dudes. They are missing their middle linebacker and some other things. Like, he's transferred to Kentucky, which is just random. It's so wild. So again, what are your expectations for Brock Glenn, the Noles passing game, and just kind of Florida State's offense in general? But I'm most interested, honestly, in the passing game. Are they going to have any continuity at all? Hakeem, Coach Norvell mentioned the other day that he was kind of banged up at the end of the year. Of course, they don't really announce that before games. That's how that works. But he's been banged up, and now he's back in the mix. Guys like that, how do they come out and play? I mean, I don't know. I was looking at the depth chart earlier today, and I finally just took the tab down because I didn't want to rely on it. I don't even want to look at it between now and the time the game starts. So, Ty Fox, still going to the game to support our team. Hey, man, cool. Absolutely. I mean, it's doing it's going to be fun. Hanging out in South Florida in December and January, anywhere through there. There's a lot to do. Angelo, I believe Florida State will cover, and this game will be more competitive than people think. I kind of lean that way too. 19.5 is just a lot. I mean, I saw that. I was like, holy cow. I had no idea. And then I read something. I forget which article I read. I went through so many different ones. That might have been the Tallahassee Democrat too. I'm not sure. But that's enormous. I mean, Angelo, I'd be curious on, because you follow Florida State really close. What do you think makes, and this is hard, what do you think makes the Vegas odds makers put it up so high? Like, again, 19.5? That's pretty rough. Mike, what's going on, man? Mike Bartz, good morning to you. Hope all is well with you and your family. And to everybody, thank you to all the everydayers and everybody that's joining the chat today. It's fun to be in here talking some football. And Merry Christmas, happy holidays, to all of you. Please subscribe and like this podcast and hit that notification bell. I truly appreciate it. We're on YouTube, and you can get in this podcast anywhere: Spotify, Odyssey, Google, whatever you want. But I am very curious about the fans. I'm surprised I don't have more questions about it yet, because that one in particular, I have no idea what to think of the passing game. That's the number one on my board, and it could be a complete disaster. It wouldn't surprise me if they threw for 100 yards. It wouldn't surprise me if they threw for 240, because it only takes a couple big plays. A guy like Hakeem hits a seam, he's gone. That could be 80 yards to the house, and that eats up a lot of yards real quick. So something to think about. Thank you, sir. Trying to be optimistic about Saturday. Go Noles. Yeah, look, I don't think if I had to pick, I'm going to pick Georgia to win. That's not really what I'm saying. They've got just more players playing. If anybody just thinks Florida State should win with a third-string quarterback, I'd love to hear your theory and the reasoning behind that. But at the same time, Carson Beck in Georgia averaged 483 yards, and they scored 60 touchdowns this year. That's a lot. That's a lot. So they average like 4.7 touchdowns a game. They can put it in the end zone. Angelo, true freshman at quarterback and how we struggled on offense. Yeah, that's what I'm asking, man. Like, I don't think that's going to go great, but I think the Florida State running game will be a little better than people think. And I also just believe in some of the guys they have at receiver, younger guys or not. They can run. Georgia's got guys missing on defense, and I've mentioned it already. I forget the guy's name, Dumas, Johnson, or whatever. Having your inside backer in that defense in particular is a nightmare for Kirby Smart and his guys. He's going to be a part of changing the line calls, how to get guys situated to flip-flop when teams go in motion. I don't know how much Norvell can use in this particular game. A lot of motions and checks beyond the first drive or so. They'll script some things that give Georgia some problems, but sustaining that over the course of 4 quarters is going to be pretty hard because you don't want to overcomplicate it and you end up with false starts, missed alignments, and running out of time on the play clock. Those things can happen, and then it frustrates a young quarterback. Norvell's not a dummy. He's not going to put his kid in the wrong spot. You know what I mean? So I'm curious about the true freshman struggling. I totally agree. I agree, Angela. Yeah, look, look, Deep, I agree with that. I don't know how you're going to struggle any more than you could against Georgia. It's a 3-4 defense, which is a pain to play against. You don't play against a lot of them. That's hard. 3-4, the outside linebackers impact the slants and some of the short routes a little bit differently, but they do come off the edge. They'll go like double eagle, which is a 50 defense. Both linebackers come. They did that a couple of years ago against Bryce Young quite a bit to try to disrupt Alabama in the national title game, and it worked. There are different things they can do schematically just based on their formations that make it pretty interesting. King Spleen, excited for the future for my Noles. Any word on quarterback 1 for 24? I have no idea. Cam Ward and all that. I was misguided. I want to bring this up. I'm glad you brought that up here real quick. Cam Ward in any quarterback situation, I thought by the second they had to choose, that's just when they can enter the portal. The NFL draft is the 15th, I believe, give or take, each year from when a kid has to announce that I'm declaring early or I'm declaring, period, whatever. They have till then. These schools can't go down to the wire, Florida State included, because you can't miss on a guy on the last day and then not have anything and sitting there, if Norvell and those guys really want it. DJ Uiagalelei is the other guy that most people think, but maybe there's somebody else. I don't know. So that's a great question. And I honestly don't know what's going to happen with that. It's very frustrating to me because if I was thinking about it earlier, like, how long do you wait before you jump in and then you're just like, you know what? We're just going to take somebody because I'm not getting left with nothing. Norvell and his staff have to have that conversation in some capacity quite a few times between now and the time they do get a quarterback, and they don't have the leverage is unfortunately for them is the problem. So it is what it is. I hope they figure that out soon because it would make my life a lot better too. Speaking of making my life a little bit better, here's something that's a little bit better for y'all. Game Time. Download the Game Time app and check it out. If you want to go to the game, Florida State and Georgia, they got flash deals. They have last-minute ticket prices. They have opportunities for you to go on their app once you get there, and you can see where the seat would be that you're in to view the field. That's the case with games that are now or in the future, NBA, whatever it is. And you can also get concerts. You can go to an opera. You can go to all kinds of things through the Game Time app. It's not just for athletics. So make sure you check it out. Game Time app is easy to navigate. The first time I was on it, no lie, I was looking at a Florida State game. I forget which one it was, but it was like 30 seconds. It was one of the games last year. Florida State was getting ready to play a game on the road, and I was curious about the stadium, and I could click and see how far the seats were. It's not that difficult. Make sure you check it out. Here's the other thing that's really cool with it. You can do this anytime. They're always updating stuff. There'll be something new, like a flash deal could come up for you and take your wife somewhere, whatever it is, and you can get a really good deal at the last second. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. All right, let's talk a little bit about Florida State again in this game and kind of get back into the comments a little bit. Let's see, where are we at? Let's see. Angelo, as well as most of our big-time players opted out and there's no tape on our younger players, I believe that Vegas thinks the moment might be too big for us, but we'll see. To be honest, Angelo, that may be the case. There's nothing worse. Like I always wonder about this too. First game of the year, let's say a team's ranked the top 15 or so, but that ranking is based on maybe a true sophomore quarterback, which Brock Glenn will be next year, by the way. And they've got a key running back, really good recruit, but he didn't play much the year before, or maybe a left tackle that's a redshirt freshman. Those kind of things are guesses. They're guesses. Same thing for these bowl games now. I'm not a gambler per se, but I would be very leery putting my hard-earned money on the table with this kind of circumstance. And that's even if Florida State had all of its players. Georgia, like Brock Bowers, if he played 15 snaps in this game and Vegas knew it, Kirby called him and said, he's playing 15 snaps exactly. That would change the point spread. They don't know if he's playing at all. Probably not. But Brock is a different kind of guy, the way he's wired. How do we know? McConkey and all these other guys, when he's in the lineup, they're single covered more often than not. That changes the dynamics. And while Florida State has a lot of players that are going to the draft or whatever, that makes your secondary wholeheartedly different when you don't have a demon like that to deal with. Nobody's guarding Brock Bowers one-on-one. There is not. So that's something to think about. Really good point by Angelo. Yeah, Vegas might think that the moment's too big for some of the younger guys. That really wouldn't shock me because it could be. It really could. Mike Bartz, I heard we signed a quarterback just waiting on the paperwork to get done. That could be. I have not heard that. But at this point in time, with all the rumors that go on, I wouldn't touch this with the 10-foot pole until a kid announced and the paperwork was done. What kids say verbally, especially on Twitter or on Instagram, etc., don't mean much to me. Coaching will definitely come into play on Saturday. Yeah. Can you imagine trying to dial up this whole scenario if you're Florida State? Third string quarterback who's a true freshman. We just lost our future NFL running back. He's declared for the National Football Draft. He's not going to play. That changes your pass blocking. Your O-line's been okay this year, but not as good as you'd hoped. You're losing multiple tight ends off the depth chart. Your top two receivers. You're an offensive guy. You're known as a play caller, a really high-level one. How do you scheme all that in one thing, and then it's Georgia lining up on the other side of the football? Good luck. That's hard. Andre Buggs. We need turnovers and special teams to have a chance to throw and fewer penalties so we can stay in the game. Go Noles. Yeah, this might be a traditional game looking at the overview. If Georgia is +1 even in turnovers, they're probably winning by double digits. Florida State needs to be +2. In special teams, if your punter or the tackling on special teams, if there was a game, or I just use this as an example, if the tackling was going to be elite in one game this year, Florida State versus Georgia would be a great one. You cannot give yards after contact and have straight up whiffs. Guys like McConkey in open space, whatever it is, no bueno. That is no good. Tony Jarrell, defense needs to stop drives and score as well. To be honest, that's a good point. If there's a chance for a scoop and score, Florida State needs to hit it. If there's a chance for Florida State to get a sack, you have to get Carson Beck, I'll talk about in a second, on the ground. Opportunities arise, take advantage. Offensively, the line needs to give the quarterback a chance, and Glenn needs to be mobile immediately and set the tone for the game. That's a good point. And there's 2 points to that for me. Well, 3. Making the first guy miss, extend the play. Making the first guy miss, and maybe there's just an opening. You're like, the heck with it. Here's an 8-yard gain for me. 2nd and 2 never goes out of style. Let's take off. And then 3rd, maybe there's some RPO game. I'm not sure how much they'll use, because if he gets hurt, who's the quarterback? You know what I mean? Like, what are they going to do? I don't think they're going to call Brock's number very much, but I could be wrong. He might run 4 or 5 times short yardage. Like, it's one thing for a quarterback sneak, but that'll be interesting. King Spleen. Since our running back room is thin for the game, do you think we are going to go pass heavy? Pass heavy with an asterisk. I think it'll be a little bit more, but I also think they'll use some of the, I know it's labeled as a pass. When the quarterback gets it in the shotgun and they just kind of fling it forward to the guys in motion, that's called a pass. To me, that's a run. The advantage for the offense there is if the handoff in that, if he hands it to him, it's a fumble if the kid drops it. But if he throws it like 2 inches, it's a pass, so it's incomplete. That's why they do it that way. It's an advantage to the offense. I think you'll see a few of those. I also think you will see a bevy of passes within 6 to 10 yards of the line of scrimmage and just screens in general. They're going to look at it like if Georgia eats it up, they eat it up. We're not letting them take it the other way. I might look at, and I can use Pro Football Focus for this, but when you're watching the game, kind of keep a mental note of the following. How often does Brock step back, diagnose, and literally want to throw the ball in the middle of the field, like that 5 to 12 yard window, about where the linebackers are from the football to snap to where the free safety is? That is the target zone for the most interceptions and turnovers in general. Big hits happen there, etc. Quarterbacks in college, like, they don't talk about it much, but coaches privately, they do everything in their freaking power to keep their quarterback from throwing that area. The odds of bad things happening are enormous there compared to anywhere else in the field. If he's able to make a few plays there, even if it's a 12-yard in route, maybe it's a slant and a guy makes somebody miss in the secondary for the Dogs, that could be the difference between keeping this close and getting killed. Because if that same pass goes the other direction for a touchdown, it could be trouble. You can't just throw to the perimeter and screens. You got to be able to advance the ball down the field or Georgia will eat you up. Jerry. Brian, will playing a respectful game help us with the future South Florida recruiting? This is a really good question, and it's a very direct answer. Hell yes. Georgia gets a lot of respect in the state of Florida, and they should. They've won the national title the last 2 years, and they've recruited South Florida heavily. Many of the kids that I talk to bring up the SEC constantly. It's the norm. Georgia's at the top of it. Let's just say Georgia wins 21-14. I'm just throwing out a number. If you lose by a touchdown with your third string quarterback, yeah, you're going to gain respect. That's the kind of thing that you can hang your hat on and say, we did this with our third string guy. Now you guys come help us get over the top. Those are common recruiting lines that Coach Bowden, everybody has used. I don't think there's any doubt that Georgia has the ability to beat the bejesus out of Florida State if they let it get out of hand. But at the same time, Florida State, if they can keep it close and doing some of the things we're talking about a few minutes ago, that's a different deal. Florida State would be able to change the perception of their program, because it's one thing to run through the ACC. It's quite another run through the SEC. Playing against two-time defending champions could provide an opportunity. That's a really good question, Jerry. Alpha Papa, how much did we spend for the quarterback? We haven't got one yet. I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know what they're offering either, to be honest with you. Jerry, do you think the game affects potential portal players to sign with Florida State? It could, but I think a lot of that is just fit individually. Portal kids are usually looking for, like, this is my spot to give myself the best chance to go to the NFL. They elevate your program by osmosis through that. Recruiting, I think, is a little bit different because these are high school kids. They're not as experienced. They have nowhere near as much worldly information. It's more fit the comfort level over time with a coach or coaches on a particular staff, Florida State included. That's how kids decide out of high school. Portal, it's a little shorter. You have less of a relationship. You look at depth charts. How do I fit into an offense? You get a little bit of info and you go on less. Does the team feel sucker punched? As a fan, I haven't felt this down since at least Clemson was in 18. where the team just collapses and the professor became a meme. I don't know if they feel sucker punched. I mean, a lot of guys left for their own personal reasons. A lot of these kids look at it in a different perspective than we do. People like myself in media and fans in general. And then, of course, I'm sure you're talking about getting the snub, that too. Like, there's a lot of different things, but every person, coach or player, trainer, etc., is going to look at this different. There are a lot of different moving parts that went against Florida State headed into this game, but you can also use that as a galvanizing point and uplift yourself. That's on each player. That's on each coach. We'll see how that goes. Let's see. Bud. Georgia favored by 20. That's way too many points to give Florida State. That probably is in a lot of ways. And I brought that up to start, and I'm going to say it again on something related to this. Bud, you have a good point. I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of irritated players that wear a Florida State helmet. And it's nothing against Georgia. It's just like, man, nobody really respects us. If you're a football player that's made it to the level of Power 5, soon to be Power 4, by the way, there's a pride that comes along with it. No matter what your God-given ability was, you had to work pretty hard to get in to major college football and be offered a scholarship to Florida State University. Same with the Georgia kids. I mean, it's two elite, tradition-rich programs. 19.5, 20? You think the Florida State players aren't going to be a little bit smug about that? Like, really? You think that's what we are? And to be honest with you, I don't blame them. So that's something to think about. It's pretty hard on me to think about that, but at the same time, again, man, Vegas, they do a lot of things their own way. They have the reasons for it. They got the math. They hire people that know what they're doing. So maybe they know something I don't. I just find it that a team that's 13-0, whether they had opt-outs or not, that seems like a hell of a lot to me. So on that point, I mean, if you want to get into that, here's another good point. Let's just talk about it. FanDuel, if you're going to be betting on the game, check it out, man. NFL's also really getting going because we're up almost to the playoffs. So as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. App is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, here's the deal. I'm still puzzled by the 19.5, and several people have brought this up. I don't know how much this is really going to matter. Maybe I'm overblowing it, but I think it's going to help Florida State for at least a little while. There's nothing like motivation, especially with college-age kids. You know what I mean? It could be with anything. Doesn't be football, but college kids get fired up about something, they usually really charge on. That's what they do. So that's just something to think about. Let's see what else we got. King, I am viewing this game as a glorified practice. In some ways, I am too. This is essentially an audition or tryout for the underclassmen. They have a lot to prove. 100%. 100%. Here's the deal. I wrote down, and again, go check it out. The podcast I did yesterday, it was about 10 minutes. That's all it was. It was just the DBs, the young DBs, several guys that are second team that have a chance to play a lot next year, and they got 4 dudes coming in. You put those together, you've got the makings of an NFL roster down the road, like the length, the speed, the height. You look at the offer list and all that, and I'm just using one spot. There are a lot of other guys. What about Hakeem Williams? What about Brock Glenn? What about any player that they have either just signed and like the guys getting ready to come in? Some of them might have went through practices, whatever, for Florida State that decided. All those guys gaining this opportunity in some way, shape, or form have a way to use this as a springboard into offseason conditioning. That's first. Very, very important. And then spring ball when it gets rolling in late February or whatever. You have to be able to use this as a motivator to get yourself higher up on the depth chart so you can get more playing time, and for just almost all the players eventually get to this thing they call the National Football League, or what I like to call the not for long. You got to maximize your chances. This game against Georgia, if you want to put good tape out there, this is your spot. Make it happen. Don't be that idiot that screws around here. Be that guy that figured it out and gets on that opportunity to make that one key play. Even if it's just a great block, like a young lineman gets in the game, great block. Tight end gets out in space, sets the edge on a jet sweep. Whatever it is, this is your chance. King, that is one of the best points of today. Congrats on that. That's a hell of a point. Colin Cressy, aside from the QB situation, is the O-line or DB the biggest worry for the matchups? I'm not as concerned about DB as some other people. I'll give that reasoning momentarily. And other people want to comment on this, please. This is open-ended. I want you all as comments. But here's the reason I say it. Take it as you will. Is the O-line or DB more worrisome in his opinion? That's the question Colin has. I say O-line because two reasons. Number one, Georgia just has a lot of talent. That's not a newsflash. Their front seven is usually really good. Backups are talented, blah, blah, blah. Two, and there's no way you can do anything about this, UGA runs what I call, and what the traditional name is, a zero tech at nose guard. They'll have a big guy that's around 300 pounds, maybe bigger, playing head up on the center. It's not a normal front. It is a true down lineman, like 1988 New York Giants, Lawrence Taylor outside linebacker standing up 3-4 with a pure nose guard. Those don't exist as much, and there's no way to really rep those in practice the same way Georgia does. Either you have literally the same kind of personnel up front, and they use everything differently with how they line up. They play more head up, two gap, where they look on both sides. It's a different responsibility. I'm curious how Florida State's O-line challenge that. Part two, I'm gung-ho on the young DBs. They're going to get beat a few times. But I bet you somebody that's one of the young guys makes a play, and there still are experienced guys playing for the Noles too. Like Cypress can take, if he had a pick six, it wouldn't shock me. He's a good football player. I like Florida State's DBs in this, especially, here's the other part of this, and I'm admitting this is part of the reason that I'm more concerned about the O-line. If Brock Bowers doesn't play, it changes what you can do on the back end of your defense, whether you zone blitz more, whether you play more man, whatever it is you're trying to do. Playing man against Brock Bowers is good luck with that. That's hard because he's a big guy that can run really fast. Rhinos. This Orange Bowl will be the first Florida State game I have voluntarily decided not to watch in 30 years. I mean, if you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. But I think it's actually going to be very interesting because I'm looking at it from a long-term perspective. To each their own. Jerry, do you think this is more of a game to find out how the younger players stack up and areas for their improvements? To a certain degree, like offensively, and again, Florida State should not win this game based on all the opt-outs in the NFL. I'm not debating that. But I don't want to just give it away either. Florida State, like any other team, is in a scenario where they have to be able, just in my opinion, to be competitive for at least a half, come hell, come high water. That's my opinion. You can script a lot of things, special plays, trick plays. Maybe you block a punt. Maybe you have a fake, whatever. Find a way to be within 7 to 10.5 at worst. But yeah, I mean, the younger guys, it's a hell of a big deal. You've got to have a lot of ways to win games. All right. It's not just kind of getting it done. You need to get it done in a million different ways in football because it's 3 different levels: offense, defense, special teams. But there are intricacies within that. Maybe one of these freshmen that we haven't seen as much, they had a guy in front of them that was an experienced guy. Maybe they're going to come out and ball. Maybe it's Destin Hill. I have no idea. Somebody's going to be that player. Who is it? To that point, how will the young DBs perform is a question I have for everybody. And this is a big one. Can Florida State's down 4 get pressure on Georgia's O-line? Those are a couple questions. We've already went over the Florida State O-line versus Georgia D-line. That's a question I have. Anybody wants to comment on that, please do. All right. Track rat, screw this game. Hey, man, it's going to be better than you think. Mike, I hope we don't have the ACC refs. Yeah, the ACC is not getting a lot of respect right now. They didn't have a real good year on the officiating front either. Albert Torres, I can't wait to see Daryl Jackson and Fisk play together. That's something I haven't talked about. And good for Daryl, man. He went through a lot of crap this year. Transfers home to be closer to his mom, and then he doesn't get to play. I mean, that's just crappy. For those of you that haven't seen him when he played at Miami, that is a big dude. And at 6'5 plus, he can move. And I'm not just talking about a head. He can break down, get low, get under some people, even though he's that tall, and cause havoc. That never goes out of style. Jerry, thanks for the podcast and Happy New Year. Same to everybody out there. Happy New Year to you as well, Jerry. I appreciate you all coming in here and chatting it up with me. Please hit that like button, hit that notification bell. Make this podcast your first each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, Google, whatever it is, Apple. Please find a way to check them out. I personally consume podcasts with my iPods in. I walk around, listen to a lot of different podcasts, and it gives me ideas on things. That's something I suggest. If you go walk, if you run, if you lift, check out podcasts, man. It's a great way to do it. King, I think our down four can get pressure, but not consistently. That's almost identical, King. I'm not kidding, to what I was thinking. I like the opportunity, to blitz them a little bit, but this, what I'm about to say, is very unusual. And props to him. Carson Beck, there's a lot of hope for him this year from Georgia fans. I'm like, he still hadn't played. I know he was good out of high school. I know he's getting coached well, but what do we expect? I forget what the number ended up being, but they were around 320 yards a game. Screen game was good. They would draw people in because they're so good with heavy play action, and he hit deep balls. And of course, when Brock Bowers plays, that helps too. I think he played in about 10 games. So yeah, that kind of matters. Colin Cressy, I bring up the DBs as a worry. Cypress, Duke, and Knowles Miss don't. Dense football savvy was evident in the first fourth down versus LSU. Okay. Read eyes and force Daniels to hesitate. Look, there are different ways to play the cat and mouse games, like a safety or a nickel, and that's what Colin's talking about here. Ventrell Cypress is a savvy player. He was good at Virginia before he came to play for the Noles. He's got another eligibility year. If he uses it, great. If not, he goes to draft. Wish him the best. But this is the kind of game, if Florida State's truly going to stay close, what Colin's talking about here is huge. Football is usually going to come down to 3 to 5 plays. If Florida State doesn't have something that he's kind of alluding to here, and I'll take it one step further and use an example, Florida State's not going to come close. They need a punt block, an interception on an out route, a guy gets stood up on a screen, the next guy comes in and strips the football, another guy picks it up and takes it to that. They need a freebie, at least one of them in this game. And Colin says he brings up the DBs as a worry, against the run, etc. There's different ways that can happen, but it can go the other direction too. You only need 1 or 2 of those plays. And that's also why I brought up the tackling. It's one thing to give up yards. It is another to give up points. Georgia may eat up the clock, drive down to your 12, and you get a sack on Beck and you force a field goal from the 21 instead of the 12, and they miss. They chewed up 5 minutes. They didn't score. You need a few things like that to go your way. Georgia's got to help you a little bit. They should win. They should absolutely win. That doesn't mean they will, and it doesn't mean there's going to be a blowout, even if they do. Big plays. Again, I'm just going to throw this out there. For Florida State to be close going into the last 5 to 8 minutes, +2. +2. They have to be +2 in the big play turnover thing. Block punt isn't a turnover, but it's the same thing. It's the biggest play in football when you get a block punt, because that can be the quickest score there is. And it's such a shock, that kind of play, or a punt return, maybe Destin Hill or somebody returns a punt, whatever. If you get that kind of situation going your direction, why can't you win the game and win it big going away? You know what I mean? Like maybe you get 2 or 3 of those. Maybe you found a problem because Georgia's got players missing and you just murder them on special teams. Stranger things have happened. But again, more likely, those kind of places keep it close. Florida State is not going to go toe-to-toe with them, throw passes down the field, middle of the field, like we discussed, with a true freshman quarterback that's barely played against UGA and win. They need help. Daddy Noel, who is going to be our locker room guy next year? That's a great question. That's a topic that we can go over numerous times as a show, by the way. Is there anyone on our team who will push the other players to excel in practice and training? This is a kind of question that Norvell will probably get hammered on and should, in a positive, I don't mean like negative, between now and the middle of spring ball. Which guys develop into leadership roles? I'm going to guess Brock Glenn will be one of them. He has a chance to start at Florida State as a sophomore, depending on how this portal situation works out at quarterback, and he's probably going to be the backup at worst. Therefore, you would assume he's one. Maybe it's Destin Hill, all the things he's been through. Maybe it's somebody like Conrad Hussey I've talked about. He's going to be a sophomore next year. If Ventrell Cypress comes back, I'll guarantee you he will be one. Somebody like Joshua Farmer, if he's truly now bought into being at Florida State, maybe he's got some of the guys around him that he's hung with, that he's passed on knowledge, one of the other guys that's a backup. I don't know. It could even be a transfer portal player. And that's the really interesting part of this. That happens sometimes. That happens. Like Cam Ward ended up being a transfer to Washington State from Incarnate Word. He ended up being a captain there. And, it's not always the case that you earn that right. It could be a guy that's a backup tight end, but he's great on special teams, is an AB student, does a lot of community work, and he's respected at practice. He could be a leader and catch 2 balls all of the 2024 season. That happens too. You don't have to be a significant contributor statistically to be a leader and or a captain. It's an interesting topic, though. This game might show us, Mr. Daddy Noel, what happens with that. If Florida State doesn't have leadership against Georgia, because there's going to be some down moments. I think we can all safely assume that. If you do not turn the next play into a better play, leadership being a part of it, the chances of failure are very high, meaning the final score on that scoreboard. So that's something to think about. Here's something else. I was looking at the stats, different games and stuff for Georgia over the last month, and this is just kind of random, nothing specific. When they're mentally dialed in, they're really good. But for whatever reason this year, and Kirby was worried about this in his preseason press conference at SEC Media Days in like July. How do you motivate a team that's won 2 national titles in a row? It's a good question. I'm not saying it's Kirby's fault. I'm not sure there was an answer for that. You could tell what he was talking about. He didn't come out and say, I don't expect good things here, but you could tell the body language and what he said. We have an opportunity, but we got to find different, he danced around because he's a smart guy. I don't think they found the formula. If they go out and they see that point spread, and it's around 20 right now, I guess it was 19.5 last time I saw it. If they go out and they struggle, maybe the first 5 minutes, maybe Florida State gets out to a 10-0 lead because they score on their first drive, some scripted plays for Glenn, and they score. Georgia does a horrible job on their first drive, punt after a 3-and-out, and Florida State drives down and gets up 10-0. Does that give the Noles an edge? Those kind of things happen in college games especially. Momentum is built off of team chemistry and emotion. Got a lot of players out for both teams, especially Florida State, so the chemistry is going to be iffy anyway. If you're not mentally dialed in, if you're not motivated, how good is Georgia going to be? That's the other question. We're talking about it from a Florida State perspective here because it's a Florida State podcast. But that's something to think about. I have no idea. Ron Lowney, just win. Yeah, if you won 6-0, you wouldn't necessarily like the outcome in terms of how you got there. But if you won 6-0, you'd be happy. You shut out the dogs, you got a win in the Orange Bowl. Sometimes that's kind of what it comes down to. Florida State historically has a flashy offense, the beautiful helmets, which I think are as good as any in college football on a side note. And I also believe that Florida State has a lot of playmakers that don't get enough respect yet because they haven't played a ton based on the fact they were behind, Keon, Johnny. I get it. But without those guys, it's pretty obvious that you're in a scenario where you're going to lose some of that attention coming in that you think you deserve, but you've never had it yet. Well, create it. You want somebody to write something about you? You want somebody to talk about you in a podcast like mine? Go out and take, like Destin gets a 12-yard out pattern, spins around, makes a guy miss, goes up the sidelines for 78-yard touchdown or something. Yeah, I'll talk about you. Here's your opportunity to do that. Why not? So that's kind of how I look at it. But that's it. If anybody else has any other questions or any other comments, open it up just to whatever you want to say. Otherwise, I'm gonna wrap it up here in just a second. But again, thank you to everybody that tuned in today. I'm gonna upload this podcast onto the main page here in a little bit. But thank you once again. This is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. And it's fun being around Florida State people that kind of get the program from a different perspective and are honest. I saw some really good comments today and questions that are realistic. You can't be where Florida State's at with all the players out, being down to your third string quarterback and expecting to win by $1 billion. Some Florida State people are probably doing that, but they're not in this chat. King, Coach Norvell is excellent at getting players to perform above expectation. Let's not worry, Noel Nation. That part I'm not worried about. He'll have them going. He's good at that. I 100% agree. And if that does, there might be a few plays or things are off. That's part of college football and football in general. Yeah, I'm not worried about the motivation. Yeah, that's a good point, King. And hopefully it's from the outset of the game too. That's important. Let's see. Alex Roberto, FSU for president. I'm not sure what that means, but you can't enter that as a candidate in the next presidential election, but it's interesting. All right. Last comment here. Florida State, it's only a couple days from game day. I don't know exactly how it's going to go. All those things. I believe the game is at 4 p.m. if I remember. I'm as curious as anybody on how that's going to go. This game could go a million ways. I've had a few people, just friends, what do you think? And I'm like, dude, I have no idea. This game can go a lot of ways. Is there a way to improve our recruiting staff without losing coaches? Back office. The number one part of recruiting, this is kind of an off-topic thing here from Daddy Noel, it is without question back office. And that means organization, making sure that from the outset of a player kind of emerging, that you get on that player and you build relationships. That's something I actually had a conversation with the coach at Madison County, right down the road from Tallahassee the other day. That's a program right on the edge of Tallahassee, talking about getting his kids exposure because they live out in a bunch of cow pastures, basically. It's, half hour from Tallahassee, but that's a world away. Those kind of kids are trying to get on the radar. And he's got a few young guys that are dudes. Staffs that don't get out on them early won't have a chance to sign. He's got some players. Alex Roberto, good point. Norvell for president. Absolutely. All right. On that note, I am going to wrap it up here. Thank you once again for tuning into this. I enjoy doing these. It's a lot of fun to get into the bowl season a little bit. After all the bowls are over and everything, I want to have a chat with everybody, just kind of talking about Florida State in general, what they can do, what they need to work on to get better, for lack of a better term, long term, because this has been a long December month. So much going on. Signing day. Obviously, it's weird with the ACC thing and all that. I want to kind of wrap up all that into a bow soon, but then move on overall. What did we learn as a whole from college football this year and how to get better, Florida State specifically, in 24 when we get to this point again? With that being stated, thank you once again, everybody. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, and become an everydayer. Love to be here. So I'll see you all again very soon.